This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the broadcast. Lake flakes are piling high again out there. A lake snow warning in effect through Sunday. South and east of Lakes Erie and Ontario, ski country could pick up another 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 feet of snow by late this weekend.
We do have a long-duration lake effect snow event underway now. It's going to be kind of a slow and steady affair, so the roads will be snow-covered and slippery.
John Hitchcock at the National Weather Service says the worst of the winter weather is likely to happen tomorrow morning. Again, that's just for the lake belts. Outside the belts, you should be good to go. But next week, some of the coldest temperatures of the season will arrive as a polar vortex straight out of Canada ushers in Arctic air, the deep freeze about to settle in on all of us. Now to New Orleans, where police are searching for more suspects in connection to the New Year's Day terror attack.
We have dozens of people that got hit by this car.
Correspondent Dave Cohen.
Investigators say 42-year-old U.S. Army veteran Shamsa Din Jabbar used a rented pickup truck to run into and over some 45 people on Bourbon Street.
15 were killed, 30 hurt when Jabbar plowed into the crowd. On the back of his truck was the Islamic State flag. President Biden at Camp David last night.
But mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS.
Jabbar was killed in a shootout with police. Multiple bombs were found in the truck and throughout the French Quarter. Madison Scarpino with Fox News.
Iconic Bourbon Street here in New Orleans is still currently an active crime scene.
The FBI looking for evidence of terrorist collaborators at Jabbar's home in Houston, Texas. Former acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf.
There's other suspects out there. And so the question for law enforcement now is, where are those individuals? Is this part of a broader plot? And if so, when is the next attack, right? These are the questions that the American people are asking.
Later today, the Sugar Bowl will kick off just blocks away from Bourbon Street in New Orleans. That game was postponed last night due to the horrific attack. New Orleans Police Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick.
We are staffing up at the same level, if not more so, than what we were preparing for Super Bowl.
Kirkpatrick is confident the Superdome will be the most secure building in America for today's college football playoff game. The Super Bowl is set to happen February 9th in New Orleans. Police in Las Vegas continue to investigate the explosion of a Tesla Cybertruck outside the Trump International Hotel. That also happened on New Year's Day. The person inside the truck was killed. 7 others were injured. Reporter Morgan Chesky.
Tesla founder Elon Musk posting, "The whole Tesla senior team is investigating this matter right now," adding, "We've never seen anything like this."
The truck used in the bomb blast and the one involved in the New Orleans attack were rented through the same app, Turo. Officials at this point call it coincidence, though they continue to investigate any possible connections. Also, the suspect in the Vegas blast, like the New Orleans attack, was ex-military. He's been identified as a 37-year-old Army vet. The 119th Congress will be sworn in tomorrow, and it's uncertain whether Mike Johnson will get to keep his job as House Speaker. He can only afford to lose one Republican vote. Tom Bevan with Real Clear Politics says Johnson upset many conservatives by cutting a deal with Democrats to avoid a government shutdown.
The spending bill that he negotiated with Democrats was a huge mistake, and it really opened the floodgates of criticism. I think it has thrown his speakership in doubt.
NBC's Gabe Gutierrez says a lot is riding on getting the speakership settled as soon as possible.
A dragged-out speaker showdown would paralyze the House and could potentially even delay the certification of the election. on January 6th.
President-elect Trump has endorsed Mike Johnson as Speaker of the 119th Congress. Plans are set for the funeral of former President Jimmy Carter. Services begin this Saturday in his hometown of Plains, Georgia. Crowds of well-wishers gathered yesterday outside the Carter Presidential Center.
Thank you for modeling what faith in action looks like. It wasn't words, it was deeds for him.
For being a role model, for being a hero, for being a friend, and thank you for showing the world what a life of service can look like.
America's 39th president will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda next week ahead of Thursday's state funeral at the Washington National Cathedral. Carter died Sunday, December 29th, at the age of 100. Class dismissed. More colleges and universities across this country are struggling to meet declining enrollment numbers. Much of this crisis is due to increasing tuition costs, lower birth rates, and the rise in alternate career paths. More than 500 private colleges have shut down the past decade. That's 3 times the number from the previous decade. Just 6 in 10 high school seniors plan to attend college in the fall. Still to come on the Noon Report for Thursday, tips for losing weight in 2025, new laws in New York for the new year, and special delivery in Pennsylvania.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams, tracking lake effect snows over the next several days, and for all of us, some bluster and chill. Forecast details are up in 10.
All right, Kevin, we will see you then. In the meantime, let's check some of the stories that are making news all across New York and Pennsylvania. The new year means new laws in New York. The most significant of those new laws is an increase in the minimum wage. It's going up 50 cents to $15.50 an hour for upstate workers. It's $16.50 an hour in New York City. And another new law this year is good for families who are planning to have children. This first-in-the-nation law requires companies offer 20 hours of paid sick leave for prenatal care. After a slow rollout, legal cannabis sales continue to grow in New York. Scott Pringle has that story.
Governor Kathy Hochul is announcing that the legal recreational marijuana industry has surpassed $1 billion in cannabis-related sales. Right now, there are more than 5,000 licenses, permits, and registrations issued or approved to date in New York State. Hochul says more than half of the licenses have been awarded to social and economic equity applicants, and that there's a lot of representation from minority and women-owned businesses. There are more than 275 licensed dispensaries in the state.
Pro-family forces argue the codification of the Empire State is nothing to be proud of. Jason McGuire is president of New York Families.
There's been this multi-year rollout now. It's been a debacle all the way through. Now you have the dispensaries asking for state bailouts, and you also have just the smell of weed everywhere. It's just been a terrible thing for New York. The data is beginning to come out. It is addictive, that it does affect teen use, but for our state, it's going to be too little, too late.
25 states, including New York, now permit pot for recreational purposes. Last year, 1,200 minors in the state of Pennsylvania underwent taxpayer-funded sex change operations.
Money is a major motivator, as they always say, follow the money. And we know that the trans industry, the child trans industry, is a very lucrative one.
Beth Serio with the group Do No Harm says profit motive is what's driving this social experimentation on kids.
So many of these hospitals and medical institutions are really captured at the very top levels by this incredibly woke and progressive ideology that pushes them towards pressure to have these types of transgender treatments available to children.
Serio says Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is the nation's largest purveyor of so-called gender-affirming care. We'll be talking more with Beth Serio on this topic a little later in the broadcast. Demands for change continue after the horrific death of a Rochester man while in prison in central New York. 43-year-old Robert Brooks was halfway through serving a 12-year sentence at the Marcy Correctional Facility in Oneida County when corrections officers beat him to death 3 weeks before Christmas.
You know, we are looking at this tragedy as an opportunity for the loss of Robert Brooks' life not to be in vain, and to see it as an opportunity to really work with the state to bring about accountability.
Jennifer Skaith with the Correctional Association of New York.
This is an opportunity not just to break down those walls and make institutions more transparent, but also help humanize the people who are living and working inside the facilities in ways that are really sorely needed.
That sound courtesy of WHAM 13 in Rochester. The 14 corrections officers involved in the fatal attack are under investigation. 13 have been suspended without pay. 1 has resigned. Pennsylvania park officials have given people a chance to start the new year off on the right foot. Family Life's Brian Query explains.
For those whose New Year's resolution was to get in better shape or do more activities outdoors, Pennsylvania park officials hosted 70 events in 46 state parks on New Year's Day. They are calling First Hikes. The guided hikes are part of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources First Day Hike initiative, encouraging individuals to get outside and active in the new year. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you, Brian. Eating healthy, exercising more, and losing weight are common New Year's resolutions, but for a lot of us, it never seems to take.
The majority of people will fall off of their New Year's resolutions within the first month because we set unrealistic goals.
Holly Gilligan is a licensed dietitian with the University of Rochester Medical Center.
The best diet you can choose is one that you can stick with consistently over time and includes a wide variety of food options.
And when it comes to weight loss,
we really only want to be losing about 1 to 2 pounds a week. That way we make sure that we're not also losing muscle mass, and we let our body have that time to adjust, and it makes it so much easier to stick with that.
Gilligan says you should avoid diets that cut out entire food groups. And when it comes to exercise, start slow and keep tabs on your progress. Very important. One of the first babies of the new year was born yesterday in Lackawanna County, Pennsylvania. The Mendoza family welcomed their son Mateo at the Geisinger Medical Center in Scranton just after 6 o'clock in the morning yesterday.
Baby Mateo is not only a blessing, but an answer to our prayers.
I'm so happy.
Very blessed to have him in our lives. Unfortunately, we had a hard time conceiving, but God's timing is perfect and very, very good, and we're just happy to have him here.
And finally, he's here.
What a great story. The name Mateo, by the way, means gift from God. You're listening to the Noon Report for Thursday on Family Life. Let's check sports next, and we're going to begin with college football kickoff set for 4 o'clock this afternoon in the national quarterfinal matchup between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That game was supposed to happen last night, but it didn't because of the truck terror attack in the Big Easy. Security at the Superdome extra tight, as you might imagine. The winner of this game moves on to play the Penn State Nittany Lions in the semifinals next Thursday night at the Orange Bowl in Miami. The other national semifinal game will happen Friday, January 10th, as the 5th-ranked Aggies of Texas take on the 8th-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes, who knocked off top-seeded Oregon last night in the Rose Bowl. Eric Dickerson's NFL rushing record will stand for at least one more season. That's because Philadelphia Eagles star Saquon Barkley will be sitting out the season finale on Sunday against his old team, the Giants. Barkley's just 101 yards shy of breaking Dickerson's record, which was set back in 1984. Barkley admits there are bigger things at play here, and he does not want to put his team at risk for the playoffs. The Eagles are locked in as the number 2 seed in the NFC. They'll host either the Packers or Commanders in the wild card round. Aaron Rodgers is preparing to meet his football mortality. The Jets quarterback slated to make his 241st career start on Sunday. It could be his last. Rodgers will decide before free agency in March if he will play next season. The 41-year-old has left open the possibility of returning to the Jets, but does not appear to be optimistic about that happening. The youngest son of LeBron James is headed to Arizona to play college basketball. Bryce James has committed to the University University of Arizona. His older brother, Bronny, played one season at USC before turning pro. He's currently playing for the Los Angeles Lakers G League squad. Bryce James is considered a four-star prospect in the 2025 recruiting class by ESPN. At the Family Life Sports Desk, I'm Bob Price. And still to come on the Noon Report, our first Noon Report of the new year. The 119th Congress about to get sworn in. ISIS-inspired terror in the Big Easy. And a deep freeze is coming our way.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Well, Oxford University Press's 2024 word of the year is brain rot. The term is not new. Henry David Thoreau first used it in his 1854 book, Walden, to refer to the devaluing of complex ideas in favor of simple ones. Today, however, brain rot has everything to do with screens. According to Oxford, brain rot is, and I quote here, the deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state as the result of overconsumption of material, particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging, end quote. Now, the word of the year is not a prize from Oxford University Press. According to the website, the word is chosen from a short list of 6 words that, and I quote here, reflect the moods and conversations that have helped shape the last year, end quote. The final word is chosen after input is given from experts as well as the public. Tracking the word of the year is a fascinating way to mark recent Western history. In the early 2000s, the process was more prescriptive than it was descriptive. Winning words like carbon neutral and carbon footprint marked the primary moods and conversations of experts more than it did wider society. However, a few years later, words like staycation and credit crunch signaled the concerns of those who were in an era of financial crisis. By the 2010s, as smartphones went into the hands of most people, the words of the year and the runner-up words of the year reflected a world that had been collapsed into screens. The selected words went from the more benign tweet or hashtag and selfie to more serious words like binge watch, doom scrolling, nomophobia, that's the fear of being without your cell phone, and parasocial, the one-sided, unreciprocated sense of intimacy felt by a user, a follower, or a fan. So if brain rot really is the best word that defines our moment, it's the conclusion of a process that started long ago. Endlessly scrolling through social media has disconnected a generation from both reality and each other, contributing to lapses in cognitive function. It's the product of the main way that people now work, relate, and even relax. However, far from being restful, studies show that our endless scrolling has left us more depressed, more stressed, more anxious, and of course, addicted to something that is slowly destroying our health. God has offered a better plan for our rest. I used to tell summer staffers exhausted from a busy couple weeks at Summit Ministries not to rest in front of the TV. Had there been a word of the year back in the late 1990s, vegging out may have been it. Still, endlessly scrolling is an even worse counterfeit for rest today because it adds in a new level of FOMO. That's fear of missing out for you kids. A better way to rest is to read. For example, the Psalms are a tremendous option to read and to rest. The mistake is to think that we can only rest if we shut off our minds. But we're to love God with our minds even as we rest. And even our spare time can be designated to glorify God and care for the bodies that He gave us. In other words, sometimes the most important thing you can do for your spiritual life is to take a nap. Rest is so important, in fact, that God actually built it into reality, reserving a whole day for it. In a culture of brain rot, resting well will be a profoundly countercultural activity. Determining to think on good things rather than endlessly scroll might be revolutionary. To restfully marvel at the beauty of creation rather than have a world reduced into a screen will be weird. But any of those things is far better than brain rot. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint. For more resources to live like a Christian today, go to breakpoint.org.
All right, John, thank you very much. Outside we go next, Kevin Williams.
Here is your Family Life weather forecast. The call for this afternoon, mostly cloudy with flurries, areas of lake snow, a couple 3 inches of additional snow, and at spots southeast of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Temperatures steady or slowly falling. Then areas of heavy lake snow tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, focusing again in areas southeast of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Otherwise and elsewhere, patchy clouds and flurries. Low tonight 20s, low 30s tomorrow, 20s to near 30 for high temperatures on Saturday.
All right, Kevin Williams, thank you very much. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price. Happy New Year, and here's what's happening Thursday, the 2nd of January, 2025. The Sugar Bowl kicks off in just a few hours in New Orleans, and just a day after the Big Easy was attacked by a terrorist. A man turned his pickup into a weapon early yesterday, mowing over pedestrians as they were ringing in the new year. Tommy Yamas with NBC News.
You feel for all those families that lost loved ones, including those still in the hospital right now fighting for their lives. One of the reasons why New Orleans may have been the target of the Sugar Bowl and those college football crowds, it was postponed from yesterday to today. The game will go on at 4 p.m. Eastern. The governor says that it's safe to have the game today and says he's going to show it by going there tonight.
Security barriers that might have protected New Orleans from the truck terrorist were removed before that horrific attack. It's because they were not working properly. 15 people were killed, dozens more hurt when 42-year-old Army vet Shamsuddin Jabbar plowed into the crowd in his rented vehicle.
You really can't stop it. If someone really wants to cause tragedy, create havoc, really hard to stop it.
That tourist witnessed the carnage in the historic French Quarter. This woman also on Bourbon Street the night of the attack.
And there were just bodies and the screams. I mean, you can't think about, unhear that. It was chaos.
President Biden says the truck terrorist was inspired by ISIS. He displayed the Islamic State flag on the back of the truck. Gernal Scott with Fox News.
The president said his administration will work to get the full story of what happened, why, and
whether there is any continuing threat.
And he'll share what they know when they know it.
The FBI is combing through Jabbar's home in Houston to find out more about possible terrorist collaborators. Reporter Madison Scarpino.
And investigators are trying to figure out how Jabbar, a Texas-born U.S. citizen, became radicalized. He served 13 years in the Army and Army Reserves.
Jabbar was killed in a shootout with police. Bombs were found in his truck and throughout the French Quarter. Police say the Tesla Cybertruck that exploded outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas yesterday was rented in Colorado. The man who blew it up was a 37-year-old Army vet from Colorado Springs. He died. 7 others were hurt. Correspondent Morgan Chesky.
Local authorities stressing 2 things. Number 1, they are calling this a, quote, isolated incident despite the ongoing investigation. Number 2, they do not believe the community is facing any impending threat at this hour.
Former FBI Assistant Director Scott Sweeto says the fact that this would-be terrorist used this particular kind of Tesla wound up being a blessing in disguise.
Teslas are basically rolling computers. They're incredibly sophisticated, gather lots of data that's going to be exploited by the investigators on scene, and hopefully that'll help determine whether there really was any kind of linkage between that incident and this awful New Orleans attack.
The Tesla Cybertruck was rented through the same app that the New Orleans terrorist used to rent his vehicle. 3 women are dead, more than 24 wounded after an illegal fireworks explosion at a home in Hawaii. That blast happened New Year's morning in Honolulu, 1 minute into the new year. Governor Josh Green says a cake bomb containing multiple aerial fireworks tipped over and fired explosives into the home's carport. That then ignited a huge stockpile of other fireworks. The surviving victims include 23 adults and 3 children, many of them in serious to critical condition. The 119th Congress gets sworn in tomorrow, and the first order of business will be to elect a new House Speaker. The current Speaker, Mike Johnson, has the support of President-elect Trump, but many conservatives may not endorse him due to the spending bill deal that he cut with Democrats. NBC's Garrett Hayes.
Yeah, look, all through the last Congress these last 2 years, we watched as first Kevin McCarthy, then Mike Johnson struggled to accomplish much of anything with that small Republican majority. In the new Congress that comes to Washington tomorrow, that majority is even smaller, making Speaker Johnson's first task even more challenging, getting himself reelected.
Speaker Johnson can only afford to lose one Republican vote if he's going to keep his job as the top Republican lawmaker on Capitol Hill. President-elect Trump plans to attend next week's funeral of Jimmy Carter. The first state funeral for a former president in 7 years will happen next Thursday at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. Jimmy Carter died last Sunday at the age of 100. The arrival of 2025 means a lot of new laws across the country.
There are close to 700 new laws through 45 states designed to protect people from having AI get and use their consumer data. There are at least 30 states and the District of Columbia who are enacting higher minimum wage laws as over $17 an hour. There are states like Florida who have new laws addressing social media. Florida is trying to ban social media for kids by not allowing anyone under the age of 14 to have a social media account.
Reporter Lori Levinson. The new year means a new work regime at Amazon.
The company says it expects its employees to begin working in the office 5 days a week. They'll have assigned desks like they did before the pandemic. Amazon announced its decision in September, so employees have had time to adjust or find another job.
Correspondent Christopher Cruz, a giant piece of space junk has crashed into an African village south of Nairobi. The Kenyan Space Agency says the object is a metallic ring 8 feet in diameter that weighs about 1,100 pounds. Look out below. Well, next at noon, a conversation with Beth Serio with the group Do No Harm. She recently exposed the inordinate amount of money that hospitals are raking in these days by performing controversial sex change operations on kids. Serio tells Family Life's Greg Gillespie this is a dangerous and growing medical industry that parents everywhere need to be aware of. Take a listen.
Nationally, we found about 14,000 children have undergone some type of sex change treatment. So we're defining that as any type of hormonal interventions, cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers, and then also surgical interventions.
The way it's being promoted in schools, in the story times at libraries, in a lot of the media and the social media pushes, parents may not be notified that their children are going through counseling, going through these medical treatments.
What we're seeing and reporting on here on these numbers and our Stop the Harm database, the numbers of children who are undergoing this medical treatment to transition. And then in a way, that's kind of the last stop, on the pipeline that many children find themselves on with this transgender ideology being so captivating, unfortunately, to this young generation. And we've certainly heard, lots of stories along the lines of what you have mentioned, in the schools and parents not being notified and the children being socially transitioned against their will.
Everybody who's listening to us knows how hard adolescence is of figuring out who we are. And then you throw in the transgender mix into that, and somebody who is uncertain of their body or uncertain of their social standing says, oh, well, maybe I could fix it by switching to the other gender, and so therefore I'm going to change my body the rest of my life.
I think we're at the tip of the iceberg right now, and we're just beginning to see the data coming out. And I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to really be faced with the longer-term consequences of what we've done to these children across our country. This ideology preys on adolescents who are, many of them, in that prepubescent or early puberty years where, like you say, nobody is comfortable with their body at that time. That's a very challenging part of life, that all of us have had to go through. We need to help our children through that, not help them explore options to not go through puberty or to go through it and come out a different gender. When they're already feeling maybe discomfort in their biological sex and they're feeling discomfort with their body, maybe they're not feeling accepted by their peers, they encounter the transgender movement, and it seems to them, to their child brains, that it offers a lot of solutions all at once. They can just become a different gender. If you don't like your body, well, that's because you're not supposed to be a girl or you're not supposed to be a boy. You can just be the opposite gender. And that might seem like it solves some very, very short-term problems, but we cannot even begin to know what long-term problems we have introduced to them. These procedures and treatments are billed as being reversible, no major side effects. We know that is completely not true. It's simply dishonest to say that a child can go on cross-sex hormones and then just choose to stop it in 5 years and not encounter any ramifications from that choice. Not to mention these surgical interventions that can render a child completely sterilized. When they're 12 or 13, they just simply cannot make that type of choice for the long term. And it's obviously up to the adults in their life and certainly the medical establishment, the doctors and nurses that they're interacting with, to speak truth to them about the situation and help them understand. It will almost certainly create larger and more problematic mental health issues for them.
That is Beth Serio with the group Do No Harm. You can learn more about this topic at stoptheharmdatabase.com.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. Well, we got a brisk west and northwesterly wind flow setting the stage for significant lake effect snows in parts of our area over the next several days. Down the road, a disturbance will arrive with potentially area-wide snow as we head into early next week, focusing on areas in Pennsylvania and south. And after that, more Arctic cold. The call for this afternoon, mostly cloudy with flurries, areas of lake snow, a couple 3 inches of additional snow in spots southeast of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Temperatures steady or slowly falling. Then areas of heavy lake snow tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday, focusing again in areas southeast of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Otherwise and elsewhere, patchy clouds and flurries. Low tonight 20s, low 30s tomorrow, 20s to near 30 for high temperatures on Saturday.
All right, lots to take in there. Thank you very much, Kevin. Finally at noon, a Santa Cruz, California construction worker may have just surfed the biggest wave ever. 23-year-old Aloe Sleeber caught a massive wave just before Christmas, estimated to be 108 feet high. We're not kidding. Happened near Half Moon Bay. Now, if confirmed, that would beat the current record holder by 22 feet. Sleeber says he's not worried, though, about breaking any record.
All I care about is I rode the biggest wave of my life, and I'm grateful for it, and it may never come again.
A 108-foot-high wave. How about that? Sleeber's been surfing since he was a young teenager. And that's our world. The world we live in. Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.